March 17, 1863. In the heart of New Orleans, a city marked by the weight of history and the promise of change, a boy named Homer Placey is born. Just 3 months earlier, President Abraham Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation, a document that promised freedom to enslaved people in Confederate territory. But in New Orleans, the promise of freedom and equality remained fragile, uncertain, and shaped by deep social divisions. Placey's father passed away when Homer was only 6 years old. His mother later remarried a man named Victor Dupart, a shoemaker and civic leader who became a steady and influential figure in Homer's life. In the post-bellum South, trades like shoemaking offered a path to stability, and like many young men of his time, Placey followed in his stepfather's footsteps. But the world was changing rapidly. In 1883, a black inventor named Jan Ernst Matzeliger patented a revolutionary machine that automated the shoe-lasting process, the method of attaching the upper part of a shoe to its sole. Matzeliger's innovation transformed the industry. Machines now did in a single day what once took skilled hands weeks to accomplish. Factories replaced workshops. Mass production replaced artisan craft. And with it, shoemaking, once a respectable and reliable trade, was slowly made obsolete. Placey's chosen profession began to vanish before his eyes. But while economic paths closed, other avenues emerged. Civic life in New Orleans, especially in the city's Creole communities, offered spaces where education, organization, and resistance flourished. Victor Dupart was not just a craftsman. He was deeply involved in black civic organizations. Through local Masonic lodges, he advocated for freedom, dignity, and equal rights. His stepson soon followed. By 1887, Homer Placey had become vice president of the Justice, Protective, Educational, and Social Club, a New Orleans organization focused on educational reform and civil rights. A year later, he married Louise Bordenave, and the newlyweds settled in the historic Tremé neighborhood. Located just north of the French Quarter, Tremé was the beating heart of Black New Orleans. It was the oldest African-American neighborhood in the city, a place of music, resistance, and community strength. In its streets and clubs, musicians blended African rhythms, blues, and European harmony, giving rise to a new sound, jazz. Tremé was not untouched by racial boundaries, but its history was shaped by a unique blend of French colonial influences and a large population of free people of color. For a time, racial lines in New Orleans were more flexible than in much of the South. Black children attended integrated schools. Interracial couples married. Some black residents sat where they pleased on streetcars and trains. But all of that was changing. In 1877, the Hayes-Tilden Compromise ended Reconstruction. It allowed Southern Democrats to regain control of state governments and withdrew federal troops from the South. With Reconstruction over, federal protections for African Americans quickly disappeared. Southern lawmakers passed a wave of segregation laws aimed at reasserting white supremacy. These new ordinances touched every part of life: schools, restaurants, hospitals, even cemeteries. Black life was segregated from cradle to grave. In 1890, the Louisiana legislature passed the Separate Car Act, requiring separate railway cars for white and black passengers. Though the law claimed that accommodations would be equal, reality told another story. The colored cars were often inferior, poorly maintained, cramped, and neglected. Black citizens across Louisiana were alarmed. Civil rights advocates feared their hard-won gains were vanishing. In New Orleans, a coalition of black professionals, educators, and community leaders formed the Citizens Committee to challenge the law in court. Their test case would involve a man whose appearance could pass as white, but whose lineage made him legally colored. His name was Homer Placey. On June 7, 1892, Placey entered the Press Street Depot in New Orleans and bought a first-class ticket aboard the East Louisiana Railroad, bound for Covington. He had no intention of completing the journey. Placey boarded the whites-only car. Though in appearance he looked white, By Louisiana law, he was not. His grandmother was a free woman of color. His family lineage included both African and French ancestry, making him Creole, and under the racial classification system of the time, he was considered 1/8 black. Legally, this single drop of African blood excluded him from the car. The conductor, pre-informed by the railroad company, approached and asked if Placey was colored. Placey responded yes, and refused to move. A private detective, hired by the railroad, was on board to ensure the arrest proceeded as planned. Placey was removed from the train and taken to jail. Not all Southern institutions supported the Separate Car Act. Several railroads, including the East Louisiana Railroad, opposed it. For them, the law was an economic burden. Maintaining separate cars increased costs, particularly on short routes where ridership was low. Rail companies had run integrated cars for years without major incident. The law forced them to segregate passengers at their own expense, even when there was no practical need. The railroad's cooperation in Placey's case was strategic. The goal was to provoke a legal challenge, to test the constitutionality of the law. Segregation wasn't just a legal structure. It was a daily performance, a public affirmation of social hierarchy. Whites demanded visible markers of their dominance. Blacks were required to sit at the back of streetcars, use separate entrances, and defer in speech and behavior. These rituals were designed to remind African Americans of their place, and to elevate whites by comparison. To challenge segregation required public defiance, and that is exactly what Homer Placey had done. His refusal to move was an act of civil disobedience, a carefully planned gesture aimed at exposing the unjust foundations of racial law. After his arrest, Placey was charged with violating the Separate Car Act. He stood before Judge John Howard Ferguson in Orleans Parish Criminal Court. As expected, the judge found him guilty. But this ruling created the legal platform the Citizens Committee had hoped for. With Placey's conviction in hand, they filed an appeal, arguing that the law violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The Louisiana Supreme Court upheld the conviction. Undeterred, the case was brought to the highest court in the nation, the United States Supreme Court. Placey v. Ferguson and the legalization of segregation. 4 years have passed since Homer Placey boarded that train in New Orleans. Now the question of his arrest, and of segregation itself, has reached the highest legal authority in the land. In May 1896, the United States Supreme Court hears arguments in Placey v. At its core lies a profound question: does the Constitution permit racial segregation under the guise of separate but equal? Placey's lawyers argue that the Louisiana Separate Car Act violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. They claim that laws requiring racial separation are not about public order or fairness, but about enforcing a sense of racial inferiority. Their words are clear: the object of the law is to stamp the colored race with a badge of inferiority. On May 18, 1896, the Supreme Court delivers its decision. By a vote of 7-1, the court upholds Homer Placey's conviction. Writing for the majority, Justice Henry Billings Brown rules that the 14th Amendment was not intended to enforce social equality or eliminate distinctions based on race. According to the majority, laws mandating separation of races are constitutional, so long as the accommodations are equal. The opinion insists that segregation does not imply inferiority, and if African Americans feel degraded by it, the court claims that perception is their own. It is a defining moment in American legal history, one that will shape generations to come. Justice Harlan's dissent: the Constitution is colorblind, only one justice dissents. John Marshall Harlan, of Kentucky. His words echo far beyond the courtroom. In the eye of the law, there is in this country no superior dominant, ruling class of citizens. Our Constitution is colorblind. He argues that segregation not only reinforces racial hierarchy, it violates the fundamental principles of American democracy. Harlan warns that this decision, like the Dred Scott ruling before it, will become a stain on the nation's conscience. His dissent is prophetic. The Supreme Court's endorsement of separate but equal provides constitutional cover for a wide array of state and local segregation law. What begins with railway cars extends to schools, public transportation, restaurants, parks, hospitals, libraries, waiting rooms, and even cemeteries. Across the South, and in many parts of the North, Jim Crow becomes a fully realized system, a social order that regulates not only where people sit, but where they live, learn, and labor. These laws are not simply about physical separation, they are designed to reimpose control, to institutionalize a new form of racial domination in the post-slavery world. Despite the court's claim that segregation does not imply inferiority, its real-world effects say otherwise. Segregated schools for black children are consistently underfunded. Hospitals for African Americans receive fewer resources. Jobs are harder to find, and wages are often lower for the same labor. The quality of services, from water fountains to courtrooms, is unequal by design. Segregation marks blackness with stigma. It denies African Americans the recognition of full citizenship, and it enforces boundaries not only with laws, but with custom, coercion, and fear. Segregation is only one part of the system. In the decades following the Civil War, many Southern black families enter into sharecropping arrangements. In theory, they work the land in exchange for a portion of the harvest. In practice, they are often trapped in cycles of debt. With little access to cash, many workers are forced to borrow from landowners, who control the terms. Interest rates are high, records are often manipulated, and disputes are settled in courts run by white elites. Over time, sharecropping begins to resemble debt peonage, a system outlawed by Congress, but common across the South by the. But debt is not the only way African Americans are forced into labor. Through a series of laws known as the Black Codes, black men, women, and children are arrested for vague and arbitrary offenses: vagrancy, loitering, speaking out of turn. The fines may be small, but court fees are steep, often more than an individual can afford. To pay off these costs, county and state governments lease the convicted to private employers, plantation owners, railroad companies, coal mines, and lumber mills. This practice is known as convict leasing, and it becomes big business. In Alabama alone, thousands of prisoners are sent to labor camps. The conditions are brutal, food is scarce, medical care is minimal, workdays are long and dangerous. Survival is never guaranteed. In some places, death rates among leased convicts surpass those of the Middle Passage. Legally free, but trapped in a system of forced labor, many African Americans experience convict leasing as a continuation of slavery by other means. It is about control. It dictates where African Americans can go, what they can access, and how they are perceived. It regulates behavior and enforces submission. Though framed as a tool for public order, segregation operates as a mechanism for economic exploitation. If African Americans are not worthy of equal schools or public spaces, then they are also seen as undeserving of equal pay, job opportunities, or housing. Segregation legitimizes inequality and makes resistance dangerous. After Plessy, states across the former Confederacy begin rewriting their constitutions to disenfranchise black voters, without ever mentioning race. Poll taxes are introduced, requiring back payments before voting. Literacy tests are administered, often unfairly or arbitrarily, and understanding clauses allow white registrars to decide who can or cannot vote. In Alabama, the impact is immediate. Before the state's 1901 Constitution, counties like Lowndes had thousands of black registered voters. Within 5 years, that number falls to under. Disenfranchisement removes African Americans from juries. It ends their political representation, and it silences their voices in the very system that governs their lives. Laws are one tool, violence is another. Sheriffs and local authorities enforced segregation with force. Beatings and arrests are common, but the most terrifying tool of racial control is lynching. Between 1880 and 1900, over 1,000 African Americans are lynched in the United States, often in public spectacles attended by crowds. These are not isolated acts, they are community events, sometimes advertised in advance. Photographs of the victims are turned into postcards. Remains are kept as souvenirs. The goal is to send a message, to instill fear, to suppress resistance, and to make clear who holds power. Resistance, repression, and the massacre at Wilmington. The ruling in Plessy v. Ferguson has sanctioned racial separation under law, but across the South, African Americans refuse to accept second-class status. In cities and towns, they organize community associations, establish schools and newspapers, form churches, and vote for candidates who represent their interests when they still can. One city in particular embodies this spirit of Black resilience: Wilmington, North Carolina. Located on the Atlantic coast, Wilmington is a thriving seaport where African Americans work as sailors, carpenters, teachers, and businessmen. They publish newspapers, serve in local government, and participate fully in the city's economic and civic life. But Wilmington's success stands in direct opposition to the vision of the South being promoted by white supremacists, a South built on Black subservience and white rule. What happens next will expose just how far white leaders will go to destroy that vision of Black equality. In the 1890s, white Democrats across the South embark on a deliberate campaign to end multiracial democracy. In North Carolina, Black voters have aligned with progressive white Republicans and members of the Populist Party to form a political coalition known as Fusion. Together they control many local governments, including Wilmington's. But Democratic leaders see this as a threat to white dominance. They vow to redeem the South, using fear, propaganda, and violence to regain power. In Wilmington, that campaign reaches its boiling point. In August of that year, an editorial is published in Wilmington's Black-owned newspaper, The Daily Record. Its editor, Alexander Manley, responds to racist justifications for lynching by pointing out the truth: the primary perpetrators of sexual violence in the South are white men, and the primary victims are Black women. White leaders seize on this editorial. They claim it is proof of the threat posed by Black political power and call for the paper's destruction. 2 days after Fusionists win a local election in November 1898, white leaders begin putting their plan into action. On the morning of November 10, a mob of over 1,000 armed white men marches on the offices of the Daily Record. Alexander Manley has already fled the city, knowing his life is in danger. The mob sets the building on fire, then it moves into the heart of Wilmington's Black neighborhood. African American men and women are attacked in the streets, homes and businesses are destroyed. Eyewitness accounts report that as many as 60 Black residents are killed. The mob is led not by fringe extremists, but by prominent figures in the community, including former Congressman Alfred Moore Waddell. That same day, Waddell and his followers forcibly remove Wilmington's legitimately elected local government. At gunpoint, Black and white Fusionist officials are told to resign and leave town. Their offices are filled by white Democrats. Wilmington has been taken by force. The coup is complete. The events of November 1898 mark the only successful violent overthrow of an elected government in U.S. history. But the repercussions extend far beyond Wilmington. Over 2,000 African Americans flee the city. Their homes, businesses, and social institutions are dismantled. The Black middle class is shattered. Political participation. For more than half a century, no African American will serve in local office. The coup also signals a broader shift across the South. White leaders see that political violence works. In state after state, new laws are passed to strip African Americans of their right to vote. The Wilmington Massacre is not an anomaly. It is part of a larger campaign to reassert white dominance. From Mississippi to Georgia to Alabama, Southern states begin rewriting their constitutions between 1890 and 9. In practice, they are designed to exclude African Americans. New barriers like poll taxes, grandfather clauses, and literacy tests are introduced to keep Black citizens from voting. In Alabama, the 1901 Constitution includes a cumulative poll tax and understanding clauses that allow officials to reject voters arbitrarily. The result is devastating. In counties like Lowndes, where thousands of Black citizens once voted, only dozens remain on the rolls just a few years later. Democracy retreats as white supremacy advances. Free Black riders were forced to sit in separate streetcars, stand in different waiting rooms, or give up seats to white passengers. These early practices provide a model for Southern segregation laws after Plessy. The difference is scale. In the South, segregation becomes a comprehensive system that touches every part of daily life, from train stations and job sites
to churches and even cemeteries. Wherever there is public space, there is a color line. Segregation appears rigid, but it is often applied selectively. In train depots, a black woman caring for a white child is allowed to sit in the whites-only waiting room. Domestic workers accompany their employers into white spaces. The rules bend, but only to benefit white comfort and convenience. Segregation is not about separation for its own sake. It is about dominance. It regulates where black people can go and how they are seen. It marks blackness as inferior and whiteness as superior. By controlling black behavior in public, white society reinforces its hold on labor, politics, and status. By labeling African Americans as unworthy of full participation, segregation justifies economic and legal exploitation. If black citizens are not fit to share a lunch counter or classroom, then in the eyes of white lawmakers, they are not entitled to equal wages or fair housing. The economic impact is profound. African Americans are forced into the lowest paying jobs. Their children attend underfunded schools. Black businesses face limited support and frequent intimidation. Segregation is not just a social system, it is an economic tool designed to keep black labor cheap, compliant, and disposable.
Enforcing Jim Crow, violence, convict leasing, the war on black freedom. As segregation law becomes embedded in the South, a parallel system arises to ensure its enforcement, a network of courts, prisons, sheriffs, and vigilantes tasked with upholding the racial hierarchy at any cost. African Americans who step outside the boundaries, who protest, organize, or simply assert their rights, are met not only with the disapproval of the law, but with swift and often brutal punishment. In the world of Jim Crow, compliance is demanded, resistance is criminalized, and survival becomes a daily negotiation. After Reconstruction, the 15th Amendment forbade discrimination in voting based on race, but white lawmakers found ways to circumvent this. Beginning in Mississippi in 1890, and spreading across the South, new state constitutions and laws are passed to strip African Americans of political power. These include poll taxes, which require payment of years of back taxes, literacy tests, often with absurd or impossible questions, understanding clauses, allowing white registrars to accept or deny voters arbitrarily. The language is neutral. The effect is not. In Alabama, 5,000 black voters are registered in Lowndes County in 1900. Just 5 years later, that number drops to fewer than. Voting isn't the only right lost. With jury rolls drawn from voter registries, African Americans are also removed from the courtroom. All-white juries become the norm, ensuring that justice, when applied to black defendants, is rarely just. Disenfranchisement lays the legal groundwork. Convict leasing enforces it with labor. By the 1880s, Southern states create criminal codes that define poverty and blackness as criminal. African Americans are arrested on vague charges: loitering, vagrancy, disrespect, reckless eyeballing. Once convicted, they face impossible fines. To pay off these debts, counties lease prisoners to private businesses, railroads, coal mines, turpentine farms, and plantations. This system, known as convict leasing, transforms incarceration into a form of profit. Conditions in labor camps are inhumane. Workers are poorly fed, denied medical care, and subjected to violence. The mortality rates are staggering. In Birmingham, Alabama, 1 in 4 prisoners dies in just 2 years. For those who created it, the system is lucrative. For those inside it, it is a different name for slavery. Law enforcement under Jim Crow functions not to protect all citizens, but to maintain racial order. Sheriffs and deputies enforce segregation with blunt force. Beatings, intimidation, and arbitrary arrests are common. African Americans are detained for speaking out, for failing to show deference, or for trying to vote. The courts offer little relief. Judges, often former enslavers or segregationists themselves, act in concert with police. Convictions are swift. Sentences are harsh. African Americans know the risks. Seeking justice in a system designed to suppress them often leads only to more harm. When the law is not enough, violence fills the gap. Between 1880 and 1900, over 1,000 African Americans are lynched across the United States. That's more than 2 people every week, publicly killed with little to no legal recourse. Lynchings are not secretive or rare, they are public spectacles. Newspapers announce them in advance. Trains are scheduled to bring in crowds. Vendors sell food and photograph. Children watch with their parents. Bodies are mutilated, burned, hung from trees. In some cases, the victims' remains are turned into souvenirs, bones, fingers, teeth, passed from hand to hand. The message is clear: Black lives are not protected by law. Any breach of racial norms, real or imagined, can result in death. Lynching becomes the most powerful tool of racial control in the Jim Crow South, a system of fear, maintaining order through violence. This violence is not random. It is systemic. It enforces a racial code that touches every aspect of life. African Americans are punished for failing to use titles of respect for whites, refusing to step off the sidewalk, challenging their status in court or at work. White supremacy requires constant reinforcement. Violence, or the threat of it, becomes part of everyday life. Though the Civil War ended slavery, it did not end the ideology that sustained it. White landowners, businessmen, and lawmakers remained convinced of their right to control black labor. The enslavers' mindset, that black people were tools for white profit, persisted. With formal slavery abolished, new systems emerged: sharecropping, debt peonage, convict leasing, and segregation. Each served a similar function: to extract labor and limit freedom. The physical chains were gone, but economic and legal chains remained. Jim Crow was not enforced solely by lawmen or courts. Ordinary white citizens participated too. African Americans were surveilled in everyday life, in stores, in buses, in parks. A perceived breach of etiquette could lead to arrest or worse. Segregation was performative. African Americans were expected to step aside when white people passed, remove their hats in white company, accept poor service, and remain silent. Even silence could be dangerous. Reckless eyeballing, looking too long at a white person, especially a woman, could result in arrest or lynching. In this world, black behavior was constantly policed. Survival required constant vigilance. Segregation didn't only deny physical access, it denied hope. Black schools were overcrowded and underfunded. Teachers worked for lower pay, with few supplies. Textbooks were hand-me-downs from white schools, sometimes missing pages or years out of date. Children were taught in crumbling buildings, without running water or heat. This was not accidental. It was part of a system designed to limit opportunity, to instill inferiority, to close doors before they opened. Resistance and renewal. The Great Migration and the Black Renaissance. As the Jim Crow system tightens its grip on the South, African Americans do not sit still. Every law meant to silence them is met with new forms of resistance. Every injustice fuels a deeper commitment to dignity, self-expression, and survival. From the courtrooms to the railroads, from rural fields to city streets, African Americans seek refuge and renewal. When voting rights are taken, they build schools. When justice is denied, they create newspapers. And when violence makes life untenable, they leave. A silent revolution begins to rise, a migration of millions, reshaping the American landscape forever. Beginning around 1910 and accelerating during World War I, African Americans begin leaving the South in unprecedented numbers, pulled by the promise of factory jobs in the North, and pushed by the realities of violence and discrimination in the South. Black families board trains and buses. They travel to cities like Chicago, Detroit, New York, Cleveland, Philadelphia, St. Louis. By 1970, more than 6 million African Americans will have taken part in what becomes known as the Great Migration. For many, it is not just a move, it is an escape, an act of defiance, a search for a better future. The North offers higher wages, voting rights, and public schools, but it does not offer full equality. In cities like Chicago and New York, African Americans face housing discrimination, redlining, and employment segregation. Police brutality is common.
White residents often resist the arrival of black neighbors, leading to violence and race riots. Yet for many families, the North still represents a measure of freedom: the right to vote, the chance to earn a living, the ability to send their children to school. These gains, however modest, plant the seeds for cultural and political transformation. This period, known as the Harlem Renaissance, produces a wave of writers, poets, artists, and musicians who articulate the black experience with clarity and pride. Among them, Langston Hughes, whose poetry speaks of sorrow and hope; Zora Neale Hurston, who captures the voice of rural black life; Duke Ellington and Bessie Smith, whose music fills clubs with sound and soul. This cultural renaissance is not simply art, it is resistance, a public declaration that black life is full, complex, and worthy of recognition. In the face of exclusion, African Americans build their own institutions. Churches become centers of organizing, education, and mutual aid. Fraternal organizations raise funds for scholarships and hospitals. Black colleges and universities, like Howard Fisk and Tuskegee, train the next generation of leaders. Journalists publish newspapers like the Chicago Defender and the Pittsburgh Courier, spreading news and advocacy across the nation. These papers call out injustice and encourage Southern readers to migrate north. Wherever African Americans are excluded, they create alternatives. Though violence and intimidation are constant threats, black communities continue to resist. In cities across the South, African Americans boycott segregated streetcars. In the courts, lawyers begin filing cases challenging unequal schools and public accommodation. Groups like the NAACP, founded in 1909, begin compiling evidence of lynchings and advocating for federal anti-lynching legislation. These early efforts often meet resistance in Congress and the courts, but the groundwork is laid for future victory. As white institutions shut their doors, African Americans build a parallel economy. Banks like the St. Luke Penny Savings Bank in Virginia, insurance companies, barbershops, and funeral homes, enterprises that circulate money within the black community and provide vital services. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Greenwood District, known as Black Wall Street, becomes one of the most prosperous black communities in the country. Here, black doctors, lawyers, and entrepreneurs thrive, but even prosperity cannot shield them from racial violence. The destruction of Black Wall Street, Tulsa, 1921. In May 1921, a false accusation against a young black man leads to white mobs attacking the Greenwood District. Over 2 days, they destroy more than 1,200 homes, burn businesses, and kill an estimated 300 black residents. The city's black population is left homeless. No one is prosecuted. Insurance claims are denied. The Tulsa Massacre is one of the deadliest incidents of racial violence in American history, and a chilling reminder that no level of success could fully protect black communities under Jim Crow. Despite petitions and protests, the federal government remains largely silent. Bills to outlaw lynching are proposed repeatedly in Congress. All are blocked, primarily by Southern senators. President after president fails to act decisively. The message is clear: African Americans must depend on their own strength, their own institutions, and their own communities. And they do. The country fights for freedom abroad, while denying it to millions at home. Black soldiers serve in segregated units. They wear the uniform but are barred from eating in the same facilities as white troops. On the home front, African American workers demand equal access to wartime industries. Under pressure, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signs Executive Order 88. Black newspapers launch the Double V campaign: victory against fascism abroad, and victory against racism at home. This campaign inspires thousands of African Americans to organize, vote, and speak out. As the war ends, soldiers return with a new determination. They have fought in North Africa, in Europe, and in the Pacific. Now they will fight for dignity in their own country. The momentum grows. Breaking the system, the civil rights movement, and the end of Jim Crow. The Second World War has ended. The soldiers have returned. But for millions of African Americans, the battles for freedom are not over. They have only just begun. In the war's aftermath, the contradiction between America's democratic ideals and its system of segregation becomes impossible to ignore. African Americans, who had fought tyranny abroad, now challenge racial injustice at home. The 1950s and 60s witnessed the birth of a powerful, coordinated, and nonviolent movement that reshapes American life, the Civil Rights Movement. This final chapter of the Jim Crow era reveals the fight to dismantle the legal structure of segregation, to win full citizenship, and to redefine the meaning of freedom. In 1954, a quiet revolution begins in the nation's highest court. In Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously rules that racial segregation in public schools is unconstitutional. The decision directly overturns Plessy v. Ferguson and declares that separate but equal has no place in education. The court acknowledges that separate facilities are inherently unequal, that segregation stigmatizes children and deprives them of equal opportunity. It is a landmark decision, but enforcement proves elusive. Across the South, states resist, segregations rally, school boards stall, and federal authorities hesitate to act. In response to the Brown ruling, Southern states organize campaigns of massive resistance. White citizens' councils, sometimes called the White Collar Klan, emerge to pressure school boards, intimidate black families, and promote private academies that will maintain segregation. In many districts, public schools are closed entirely rather than integrated. Even as the law shifts, the Jim Crow system clings to life, not just in classrooms, but in buses, restaurants, courthouses, and public parks. But change is coming, not from above, but from below. In 1955, a single act of defiance sparks a mass movement. On December 1, Rosa Parks, a 42-year-old seamstress in Montgomery, Alabama, refuses to give up her bus seat to a white passenger. She is arrested. In response, the black community of Montgomery organizes a bus boycott that lasts over a year. Tens of thousands walk to work, organize carpools, and endure harassment. A young pastor named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. emerges as a leader. In 1956, the Supreme Court rules bus segregation unconstitutional. The boycott ends in victory and marks the rise of a new national movement grounded in nonviolence and collective action. Inspired by Montgomery, a new generation of activists takes up the fight. In 1960, 4 black college students in Greensboro, North Carolina, stage a sit-in at a segregated Woolworth's lunch counter. Within months, sit-ins spread to over 50 cities. In 1961, interracial groups of freedom riders board buses through the South to challenge segregation in interstate travel. They are beaten, jailed, and bombed, but they do not stop. In 1964, students flood into Mississippi for Freedom Summer, registering voters and building schools. 3 young activists, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, are murdered by Klansmen and local law enforcement. The movement gains momentum, and the nation begins to watch. In 1963, Birmingham, Alabama becomes the focal point of the movement. Organized by King and local leaders, protests confront segregation head-on. Police Chief Bull Connor responds with fire hoses, attack dogs, and mass arrests, including hundreds of children. Televised images shock the world. In 1965, a voting rights march from Selma to Montgomery is met with brutal violence on Bloody Sunday. Peaceful marchers are attacked by police on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The response is swift. Public outrage forces President Lyndon B. Johnson and Congress to act. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act is passed, outlawing segregation in public places and banning employment discrimination based on race, religion, or gender. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act is signed into law, prohibiting racial discrimination in voting and empowering federal oversight of elections in the South. These laws mark the official end of legal segregation, the formal death of Jim Crow. While the Jim Crow legal system is dismantled, its legacy persists. Schools remain deeply unequal, housing segregation, job discrimination, and disparities in the criminal justice system continue. Incarceration becomes a new frontier of racial control. The civil rights movement wins battles, but the war for equality is not over. Homer Plessy's name remains etched in American legal history, but more than a name, it symbolizes the long arc of resistance, from the quiet defiance of a train passenger to the mass marches of millions. The Jim Crow era spanned nearly a century. It touched every black life from birth to death, through laws, customs, and violence. but it was also met with unwavering resistance, in courtrooms and classrooms, on buses and lunch counters, in fields and factories, in music, art, writing and speech. African Americans never stopped asserting their humanity, never stopped building, never stopped organizing. From Homer Plessy to Rosa Parks, from W.E.B. Du Bois to Ella Baker, from Fannie Lou Hamer to Martin Luther King Jr., the movement never ceased. Jim Crow fell, but the fight for justice, dignity and equality continued, but their legacy remains. The story of Jim Crow is not just a story of laws and court decisions, it is the story of power, how it is kept, how it is challenged, and how it is changed. To remember this history is not to dwell in the past, it is to understand the present, and to shape the future, because justice is never guaranteed. It must be defended, again and again, by those willing to stand, speak and move forward.